Have you recorded our conversation? You've recorded the conversation, mate. I'll have you fucking shot in 5 minutes.
Well, we don't want to go to the
Don't
wrong...
fucking laugh.
We just want local knowledge, so we go to the right
Yeah, so
place.
what's the score here then? Because you're asking me very, very strange questions.
There is more slavery in the world today than at any other time in human history. And the fastest growing form of slavery is this thing called human trafficking, which is very simply two things. It's deception or lies, followed by coercion and force. Maria was 12 going on 13 years old when some men came to her very poor community and spoke to her mother and promised that they could get Maria a job in the neighbouring country, where they said she could earn enough money through selling clothes and food to send home and support her entire family. With the blessing of her family, Maria went with these men. They did take her to a large factory-style building, but much to her horror, she discovered only too late that it was a brothel. And instead of selling food and clothing, she was told that she was to be selling her body. And she was raped, broken in every way possible. The first opportunity Maria got, she escaped. She got out of the brothel somehow. She ran down the road, she found the local police station, she burst through the doors and told them exactly what had happened to her. The local police unfortunately took her straight back to the brothel. It turned out that they provided protection for the criminals that worked in this industry. They got free girls whenever they wanted them. So when I met Maria, she was still in that brothel. She was 15 going on 16. She'd been there for about 3 years, and she had absolutely no recourse to justice. I'm Daniel Walker. I am the Executive Director of NVader, an organisation that combats sex trafficking, the sex trafficking in particular of women and children, and we do that through rescuing victims of sex trafficking, facilitating the prosecution of the perpetrators responsible, and in the process empowering communities to effectively combat sex trafficking themselves. I met Maria because I was in that brothel buying sex. I was in the brothel speaking to the brothel manager, and I identified Maria, and he told me exactly what she was good at, how long I could have and how much it would cost. What he didn't know was that I was wearing a covert camera and that I was there on behalf of an international human rights organisation and was gathering evidence which we could then use to set Maria and the other women and children enslaved there free. There is more slavery in the world today than at any other time in human history. Many estimate that in the next 10 years it will surpass drugs and become the #1 source of income for organised crime. And that's simply because you can only use cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, you can only use it once and it's gone. But you can sell a young woman or a child many times a day, again and again and again. The profits are astronomical. Organised crime earns more than $99 billion from the commercial sexual sale of women and children in profits alone. And typically the penalties, if in the unlikely event they are caught, the penalties for trafficking in women and children are lower than they are for trafficking drugs. NVader has been operational for just over 2 years now, and we have rescued approximately 110 women and children during that time. Through our prosecutions, we've also prevented the trafficking of many more. For example, 2 men last year were sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, and those 2 men were trafficking approximately 300 women a year. So for those 10 years that they are in jail, another 3,000 women will not be trafficked. So it's the rescue, the prevention that comes through education and prosecution, and ultimately, of course, empowering local communities to join the fight, to identify victims and to stand up for their rights and to stop their exploitation. I went into one village in Southeast Asia where we had been told there were very young children available for sale, and walked through a series of alleyways to one of several small buildings that was being used as a brothel. And the male manager came in and he had two girls who were about 16 or 17, and he said, for $30 you can have these girls for as long as you want. And I said, actually, you know, these girls are a bit old for what I'm looking for. I'm going to go elsewhere, thanks anyway. And he said, oh, wait, I know what you want. And he left the room. A few moments later he came back and he had two girls who were 6 years old. And they had pigtails in their hair and teddy bears on their shirts. And he said, for $30 you can have these girls for 1 hour and do whatever you want. When he came into the room with those two little girls and he said that, I was thrilled, because I was seeing that through the eyes of a detective, through an investigator. I was recording the whole thing and I thought, this guy is screwed. This is fantastic evidence, and the evidence that I am gathering, this transaction that is happening right now, will hopefully be all that is necessary, that will be all that we need to set those little girls free and to hold him accountable. Because of international travel, sometimes it was absolutely surreal to be 1 minute sitting in a brothel in Southeast Asia with a 6-year-old girl on my knee who was being sold to me as a sex object, and then jumping on a plane, you know, within a day, being back in the United States and going to a birthday party with other 6-7-year-old girls, our neighbours, their friends, and having other little girls jump up and sit on my knee in a very normal, healthy setting. Ultimately, we documented between 40 and 50 children in this village who were being sold every day to men from New Zealand, Australia, United States, Canada, Europe. And we were able to facilitate a raid on that particular target. A number of those children were rescued, and 10 of those offenders were ultimately imprisoned, some for up to 20 years. Some of the most heartbreaking conversations I have had inside brothels are with children who are trying to protect their younger siblings. And so I've had one little girl who was probably 10 years old, 10 going on 11 years old, and she said, please pick me, please pick me. And I was literally a little bit confused as to why she wanted me to pick her over everyone else, but she didn't want me to pick her younger sister, who was about 6. I remember meeting a couple of young girls, one in particular in another brothel in Southeast Asia, and when she turned to look at me, I looked in her eyes and there was nothing there. She was absolutely gone. She had been so traumatized and so abused. There was just death. She was a living body, but her soul had been so destroyed. Yeah, it's meeting women and children in that situation that breaks your heart, but also motivates you to, fills you with an anger and a passion to use every ounce of your being and energy to set them free. Because of the size of human trafficking, it can often feel overwhelming, and people can get that sense of, you know, what's the point? It's just too big and too dark, and what can I possibly do to fight it? What I typically say in response to that is, what if it was your daughter? What if it was your sister, your niece, your granddaughter, and we did nothing else all year except rescue your daughter, just one? Would it be worth it? And universally, people have to say, well, yes, if it was my daughter, I don't care what else you did, and I don't really care how you do it, but if you rescued my daughter from hell on earth, you set her free, it would absolutely be worth it. I think what is most horrific about human trafficking is that it is human trafficking, that it's not trafficking in drugs or guns. This is women and children that are being forced into slavery. And what's most horrific about sex trafficking is that it's exploiting that part of us that was created for intimacy, for affection, delight and beauty, and turning it into an instrument of destruction and rape, and ultimately the very worst form of slavery known to man. 1% of all victims are ever rescued. And again, that says something about our world, that our indifference to the women and children that are enslaved in this modern form of slavery. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, unless all are free, none are free. and we can live inside a bubble, which is essentially what we do in the West, in our middle class bubble. But at a time when there are millions and millions of women being raped for profit in our global community, in our global village, it begs the question, what kind of freedom do we really enjoy? What kind of blinders do we have to pull down to happily, blithely exist in our middle class Western lifestyles, knowing that right outside our door are women and children crying out for rescue. As a boy growing up, I always wanted to be a superhero. I loved Batman, Superman, the Lone Ranger, Zorro. I always had a sword in my hand and a gun in the other. And when I first read about these little girls, as young as my little sister, 10, 11, 12 years old, being sold, having to sell themselves on city streets just to survive, it absolutely broke my heart. And I thought, if I do nothing else in this life, I want to do that. I want to stop that. NVader was born out of certainly the successes that I participated in, but also my failures. And the lessons learned then shaped what NVader came to be. And NVader very much is about combating sex trafficking, but only using best practices, always putting the welfare of our staff, their marriages, their health, their relationships first. I think what I would love to see people do is act in some way. Now that you are aware, what will you do? Yes, you are free, but what will you do with your freedom?